appreciated this hearing so far.
A half-hour break?
I mean, you have publicly recused yourself from all matters relating to the ongoing Russia investigation. And Mr. Attorney General, I wanted to focus on that because I'm concerned about whether or not you've honored that recusal fully. It is easy to state that a recusal applies, but it's harder and more important to actually do it. I wrote to the Office of Professional Responsibility in the Department of Justice back in July, asking exactly how employees at the Department of Justice participating in Special Counsel Mueller's investigation are ensuring that they are aware of and honoring your recusal, and I haven't gotten an answer. I took that sort of personally until I realized that from what the chairman said earlier, that there are many letters that have not been answered yet by the department. So if your department hasn't yet answered, could you please, Mr. Attorney General, just answer directly how are employees participating in Special Counsel Mueller's investigation instructed about your recusal?
The day I took office, after I had told this committee that I would meet with the ethics officials at the department to determine whether recusal was appropriate, the day after that, we had my first meeting, and we had a series of meetings, and since I realized that there was a possibility I would need to recuse myself at the first meeting, I received no information whatsoever from that investigation. And never met with investigators, didn't even know who the lawyers were officially working the case, and reviewed no documents relating to it. We had a little brief from the ethics officials, the nature of the case, because you need to know something about the case before you can make an official recusal decision. When I recused myself, we sent an email out to all the key people in the Department of Justice, including the FBI Director Comey, that I would not be involved in the investigation, and that neither I nor my staff, the Attorney General's staff, were to be involved in this investigation or receive information about it. Director Comey once said that he didn't get this, but we've got the document, the email to him directly by name. I'm sure he gets a lot, and he may have missed it, but we definitely did that, and I've complied with that rigorously.
So if I could just make sure.
So for the purpose of the Russian investigation, the Attorney General of the United States is Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein. He makes all the decisions and manages the processes and guarantees its integrity.
Have you spoken with President Trump about Special Counsel Mueller or his investigation at any point?
I've never discussed anything with him well, I'm not going to comment on the conversations we've had because I think that violates the privilege, executive privilege.
Do you think the Deputy Attorney General made the right decision to appoint a special counsel? You spoke previously in response to another senator's question about knowing Mr. Mueller, having respect for his professionalism, his experience. Do you think that was the right choice?
The decision to appoint a special counsel depends on the facts and circumstances of the case, of which he was fully apprised, and I'm not. So I'm not able to opine about his judgment. But he's a talented and experienced prosecutor.
You made a statement at the outset that some of the core mission of the Department of Justice, fighting violent crime, keeping our nation safe, respecting rule of law and promoting rule of law. I think it is important, as you have stated, that this investigation reach its natural and full conclusion without any interference. In your view, if the president asked for your advice about whether or not to remove or fire the special counsel, would that be an appropriate conversation for him to have with you?
I have not thought that through, but it's if it deals with the special counsel, I think the communication would need to be directed to the person who supervises the special counsel, and that would be the Deputy Attorney General.
If the special counsel were removed, would you protest or consider resigning in order to clarify the importance of that position and that investigation being followed to its end?
You know, I won't attempt to deal with a hypothetical. I think it'd be best just to leave my answer as I gave it.
Let me move to another recusal. In your confirmation hearing, you said, and I think this is in response to a question from the chairman, you had offered it'd be the proper thing for me to do to recuse myself from any questions involving investigations that involve Secretary Clinton and that were raised during the campaign. The chairman said, when you say you'll recuse, you mean you'll actually recuse, and the decision will therefore fall to the Deputy Attorney General. And you say, after some intervening sentences, there is a procedure for that which I will follow. And you've just shared with me you followed that promptly. Yet on May 9th, Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein delivered to you a memo entitled Restoring Public Confidence in the FBI that is about Director Comey's conduct during the Clinton email investigation, and concludes that the director handled the conclusion of that email investigation incorrectly. Is that correct?
Yes. You're talking about the recommendation.
Yes. And then on the same day, you penned a memo to the president relying exclusively on the Deputy Attorney General's memo where you recommend that Director Comey be removed, correct?
That's correct.
So if you were recusing yourself from any investigations or issues that relate to Secretary Clinton and the email investigation, why did you write a memo to the president exclusively relying on that matter? The administration's stated reason for removing Director Comey was his conduct relating to the Clinton email investigation. Why would you participate directly in that matter if you were recused from considering it?
Well, first, Attorney General does not recuse himself from supervision of the FBI, a $7 billion agency that he's responsible for, because he may have recused himself about one or more matters that the FBI was working on, number one. Number two, the Clinton case had been closed. It was not an ongoing matter at that time. Number three, the discussion about whether or not Mr. Comey conducted himself properly did not deal with whether or not there was sufficient evidence to go forward or not with regard to a charge against Secretary Clinton. It dealt with whether or not he acted properly when he just closed the case instead of the Attorney General's office or the prosecutors in the Attorney General's office. So I think it's quite different, Senator Coons. Actually, I'm glad to have the opportunity to discuss that, but I'm confident that I was not required to recuse myself on the decision of whether or not to keep Director Comey.
So, Mr. Attorney General, if I might just conclude, in your letter on May 9th, you say, I'm committed to the rule of law at the Department of Justice, and I'm concerned that we have a different understanding of the scope of your recusal and the relevancy of the email investigation when that was the cited reason for the firing of the FBI director.
Mr. Chairman, I'll just respond and say I'm very comfortable that I did not violate what I told this committee are proper rules in not recusing myself on the decision of Mr. Comey, because it was not based on the merits of the investigation. It was based on his performance publicly and in regard to announcing a decision that was a decision he was not entitled to announce.
Senator, tell us.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Attorney General Sessions, thank you for being here. I hope you know that I've been a strong supporter of yours since the nomination process and confirmation, and quite honestly, up into the summertime frame when for a little bit I thought the president was wavering his support for you. I have the utmost confidence in you, and I will continue to. I want to cover something fairly briefly. The good news is I've got to preside at 1, so I can't go over even if I wanted to. You've got the Civil Division nominee coming before us, and I know that the nominees in the room now, so we can drill down on that during the confirmation. But choke point is something I'm still concerned with. Your office responded to a letter that we sent to you all that the program is effectively over. But when you go out and talk to businesses and depository institutions, they are still concerned with what's going on out there with examiners and people out in the various regulatory agencies that I still think haven't gotten the memo. So I would appreciate any efforts that DOJ can do to communicate to these lower level bureaucrats who think they're going to transcend us and that they can reawaken this program at some point, that if they do that now and we can find out that they're doing that and not paying attention to the leadership, I hope that means that it comes at the cost of their jobs. I don't want to talk about it now because I want to talk about a favorite subject that you and I have had several times on immigration, but I do need to get better clarity for people who were abused through the Operation Choke Point program under the Obama administration, and we got to get certainty to those examiners. If they continue to do it, I'm going to do everything I can to make sure they're not working there anymore.
Senator Tillis, thank you for your leadership on choke point issues. We believe we took immediate and strong action to stop it as it was being officially described in the Department of Justice. But if there are other problems out there and that
with people back in North Carolina and people I've heard from across the country, and it really probably needs to go down to the name of the people who are not paying attention to what the leadership has told them to do. And if they don't change their behavior, we need to shed light on those individuals. And to the extent they can be terminated for that behavior, I'm going to push every button that I can to make sure. Does anybody really want to throw out good, educated, and accomplished young people who have jobs, some serving their country, brought to this country through no fault of their own? We're talking about the DACA recipients. What do you say to that citizen?
I say that it cannot be the policy of the United States that one can bring a young person in the country and they can't be deported. Mm-hmm. That's not a sustainable policy overall. However,
I agree with that,
right,
but you realize that that's a statement from a citizen who also happens to be the United States president. Tweeted on September the 14th. So what do you say to him when he says that to you directly in the Oval Office?
The president has made clear that he would like to deal compassionately with people, young people who came here and who've been here a long time and have had and performed well in our country. And he would like to have reform in that area, but he wants some other things that are essential to go with it, I think you do.
I do. And again, I should have mentioned that I always appreciated your chairmanship in the Immigration Subcommittee. I always characterized it as a debate club because you and I got a little bit of difference.
Well, you are an active and valuable participant.
You were a great leader. Well, I want to ask another question about DACA. It's your opinion that that's an executive branch overreach.
Exactly.
So it would also be your opinion that every day that the president has delayed until May the 5th, that he's actually condoning an executive branch overreach. That in an ideal world, he would have just ended the program and caused Congress to do their job back on September 5th.
The Department of Homeland Security has committed a lot of effort to start that program, and they need some time to wind it down. I think this is the program.
But why not January?
Well, we think that's what they requested and they feel is appropriate, and I believe it's appropriate to wind down.
What do you think the president, and I'm sorry because I'm running out of time and I do have to preside, what do you think the president meant in a tweet back in early September when he said we have 6 months to legalize DACA, 6 months to legalize DACA, or I will revisit the issue. Would you advise him that he has no administrative authority to revisit this issue?
I'm not sure what the president meant exactly in these short statements, but I know that he wants to fix this problem. As you do.
I do. And you were in the Senate for 20 years, is that right?
That's correct.
How many successful outcomes for immigration reform did you observe over 20 years?
Not many.
Or any?
Well, I saw some bad things happen.
Okay. Well,
But anything that my little line has always been, anytime you brought up anything in this body on immigration that would actually work to reduce lawlessness, it never passed.
So, General Sessions, if we go down the path of if you know, there are two extremes in this debate. We don't need borders, we need bridges. They're wrong. We have the other group that says they entered this country illegally, even if they were minors, they all need to go home. If we allow either of those two ends of the spectrum to dominate the debate, where do you think we're going to be 20 years from now on immigration reform?
I think that's probably not really a fair analysis of it. I think the American people are prepared. What the American people want and what I'd like to see is us end the lawlessness. Does anybody advocate allowing people to enter the country unlawfully?
Absolutely not. And I'm going to finish at the second mark. What I'd like, because you are the Attorney General, but you and a number of your staff are actively engaged in the immigration reform strategy. And I would ask people to think reasonably about how we can go about taking care of every layer of issues that we have there, whether it's the DACA population, the work visa programs, the abuses of our visa waiver programs or visa programs, and then the illegally present. Until we get sane people coming in a room and recognizing we're not going to get it all done in one bill, hadn't even been done when the Democrats had supermajorities, then we've got to have people getting into a constructive dialogue and take these as chunks. Our people who will be here 20 years from now, I won't be one of them, are going to be guilty of the same failure of the last 20 years. And I look forward to working with you and having people in your office productively engage in something that produces an outcome. Thank you.
Thank you. We have an opportunity, Senator Tillis, right now.
Before we break for lunch, Senator Franken's here. I think I want to say something that Senator Feinstein and I know that maybe Senator Franken and you don't know, that may bring some understanding. So I want to read here. Director Comey briefed Ranking Member Feinstein and me about the Russia investigation back in March. He provided some specific information that I think would resolve Senator Franken's concerns about the Attorney General. Unfortunately, we're not at liberty to say something that was given to us in a secured briefing. But after that briefing, the ranking member and I wrote to the FBI and requested that the FBI give the full committee, all 20 members of this committee, to know what the two of us know from that briefing. The FBI did not do that. And now that we have conflicts, that I think could have been avoided if the FBI would just have been more transparent with the oversight of this committee. We'll adjourn now for...
No, Senator Hirono hasn't had an opportunity.
No, two of them haven't. I announced that we were going to...
Oh, you want to...
Yeah, break now. For the benefit of Senator Sessions.
If it's critical to their schedules, Mr. Chairman, I could stay a little bit, but...
Well, you can talk afterwards, because okay. I said we were going to break when we got done with him. And so we should reconvene then at 1:25 exactly.
All right there, folks. So they are going to be taking a break, about a 25-minute break there. You're watching the Fox 10 News Now stream. We'll be back with that when they reconvene. And we are getting ready for the Fox 10 Extra Show. So thanks to everybody joining us right now on fox10phoenix.com. This is News Now. And welcome, everybody, to News Now. You're taking a live look at downtown Phoenix. It is October 18th. It is Hump Day. We are halfway through the work week. Hi, everybody. Mike Page as we continue on here with News Now, taking feeds from all over the country. I'm so glad that you could join me today. We got a lot to talk about. Attorney General Jeff Sessions is on break right now, but for the last 2.5 hours, he has been testimony on Capitol Hill, ranging everything from immigration to tax reform and to also what the future of this travel ban could be in place for. So that's coming up in a little bit. Right now, they are on a break. Here's what else we are monitoring for you right here on News Now. Taking a live look at the NFL headquarters, where we are expecting at any moment Roger Goodell to give a press conference. Now, yesterday he gave us a press conference, but it was very brief. He only took one question from the media. And we did also learn that yesterday that the NFL will not tell their players if they should kneel for the national anthem there. So a lot is going on right now, right here on News Now. But just moments ago, President Trump met with his finance committee. Let's take some of that video right now for you.
Orrin Hatch. Thank you, Orrin. Thank you. And Ranking Member Ron Wyden for joining us today. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ron. We're here to discuss our plan to deliver historic tax cuts for American families, businesses, workers. It will be the largest tax cut in the history of our country. Here are some of the highlights from our framework. We are doubling the amount of income that is taxed at the zero bracket. In other words, the zero bracket, many people will be able to take advantage of that bracket that are not in that bracket. We're increasing the child tax credit. We will end the estate tax, sometimes referred to as the death tax. We will cut the business tax rate from the highest in the developed world at 35% to no more than 20%. According to the Council of Economic Advisors, reducing the corporate tax rate from 35 to 20% would increase average household income by $4,000 a year. So each household, on average, would take in $4,000, and they'll go out and they'll spend that money, and that'll be great for the economy. We're cutting taxes on small businesses to the lowest rate in more than 80 years. For 30 million Americans who own small businesses, it will be a 40% tax cut, and they will thrive, and they will expand, and they will be happy. For at least the next 5 years, businesses and manufacturers will be able to expense the full value of new equipment in the year in which they buy it, something which nobody even thought in terms of, and something which will have, I think, one of the biggest impacts on our economy. We will impose a one-time low tax on trillions of dollars of wealth parked overseas to encourage companies to bring back those profits and bring them back home and spend the money at home where it belongs. Right now, they can't bring the money back in because of bureaucratic problems, because of certain legislation, and most importantly, because the tax rate is so high that only a very foolish company head would bring the money back in. I think the numbers could even hit the $4 trillion mark. People have been saying $2.5 trillion for many years, but we know it's now much higher than that. The vast majority of Americans will be able to file their taxes on a single sheet of paper, because not only will these be massive tax cuts, but these will be a big simplification. It's going to be a very big simplification. So it's really tax cuts and reform, but I focus on tax cuts because it's such an important weapon to get our country really moving. So we'll go from being one of the highest tax nations in the world to one of the lowest tax, meaning more jobs, higher wages, and more products stamped with the words, "Made in the USA." This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, in my opinion. This is something that will be really unique. The timing is right. I have had people on both sides, and I promise not to mention the name of the people on the other sides or names, but a lot of people are liking this very much, and I think we're going to have tremendous support. We're going to restore America's competitive edge, rebuild America's middle class, very much aimed at the middle class, and renew the promise of the American dream. We're going to have companies pouring back into our country instead of leaving our country. We're not going to have them leave and fire everybody and make products and sell them back into our country totally untaxed. All we do is end up with lots of people without jobs and no product. It's not going to happen anymore. So I just want to thank everybody for being here. It's a great honor. We're going to have a great discussion today, and I'm sure we'll have unanimous support. I have no doubt, right? Right, Ron? I think, right? So thank you very much, everybody. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you.
Mr. President, what did you guys at the Sergeant Johnson's widow on the phone yesterday?
Didn't say what that congresswoman said. Didn't say it at all. She knows it, and she now is not saying it. I did not say what she said, and I'd like her to make the statement again, because I did not say what she said. I had a very nice conversation with the woman, with the wife, who sounded like a lovely woman, did not say what the congresswoman said, and most people aren't too surprised to hear that.
What's the proof, Mr. President?
Let her make her statement again, and then you'll find out.
Saying that you said this.
Okay, let her make her statement again, and then you'll find out.
Why did you make it? Thank you. Where do you go with the bipartisan healthcare?
Well, we'll see the bipartisan. We're going to see the bipartisan, and Lamar Alexander's working on it very hard from our side. And if something can happen, that's fine. But I won't do anything to enrich the insurance companies, because right now the insurance companies are being enriched. They've been enriched by Obamacare like nothing anybody's ever seen before. I am not going to do anything to enrich the insurance companies. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Thank you.
There you go. President Trump meeting with his finance committee, but also taking a question from a reporter, and President Trump saying that Florida lawmaker was lying about his call to the soldier's widow. This came out late yesterday afternoon, early evening. The Florida congresswoman said that President Trump called the military widow up and said he knew what he signed up for, but when it happens, it hurts anyway. President Trump has denied that he has said that. He says that was made up, fabricated. So we're going to learn a little bit more about this probably. This will probably be a main question today at the White House press briefing. That's coming up at expected about 11 o'clock our time, but you know, they always schedule it for 11. Very rarely do they come right on time. So we'll monitor that feed, just like we're monitoring this feed here for you as well. The NFL headquarters, where we are awaiting Roger Goodell to make his statement. Just yesterday, remember, we did learn that Roger Goodell said that players will not be told whether they should or shouldn't kneel for the American flag or the national anthem. So I guess we'll be learning a little bit more about that as well. So a lot going on here on News Now today. Very, very busy day. And also we will be showing you a little bit later today a travel ban protest. Just yesterday, a federal judge in Hawaii knocked down President Trump's third travel ban. So we'll have that for you here, as some protesters are saying, don't make it a fourth one. You've struck out 3 times, and enough is enough. So you see the signs there as well. We'll have that coming up in a little bit as well. Busy, busy day here on News Now. And a little bit later as well, we're going to go up high above the earth. We talk to a NASA astronaut. What's it like in space? He's going to join me right here on News Now. You're not going to want to miss that. Great interview, great insight. It's all coming up next. And welcome back here to News Now, taking a live look here at the White House. You are watching News Now, and hi, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. It is a busy day of news. We are still monitoring, waiting for Roger Goodell, NFL commissioner, to do a press conference. We heard from him yesterday, and we're expecting to hear from him very shortly, as someone just stepped right in front of that camera right there. And then a little bit later, we're going to go high above the Earth, and we're going to talk to a NASA astronaut. Great interview with a NASA astronaut. Great insight as well, because I always wanted to know, what's it like in space? I think you guys want to know as well. We'll have that interview for you a little bit later. But while we do continue to wait for the NFL commissioner, Roger Goodell, let's talk about yesterday what happened with the third strike down of President Trump's travel ban. That was happening just yesterday afternoon, and today a protest was happening in Chicago saying, look, it's happened 3 times now, this takedown of President Trump's travel ban. Enough is enough. They are saying, these advocates are saying enough is enough. 1, 2, 3, you're out. That's how they played in baseball. Will there be a 4th try at a travel ban? We'll wait and see for that. But now let's go to this protest that happened just moments ago.
As a matter of fact, it obscures and distracts from the real hard intelligence and the real national security initiatives that can make us secure. All it does is prevent people from seeking medical care when they need it, education where they need it. Employers who have potential employees coming in are denied these employees where they need them. Family members from being reunited. There are a lot of real human tragedies and human stories involved in this ban that we need to be able to tell. We have with us today people from the Christian community, the Jewish community, the various immigrant communities, and we're here in one voice to say no to the Muslim ban. Not now, not ever, no Muslim ban ever. There are 8 countries in the current proclamation: Yemen, Iran, Syria, Libya, Chad, Somalia, and for good measure, North Korea and Venezuela, which we believe is a placebo in order to prep for future litigation to suggest that this is not a Muslim ban. But it is, because North Korea, for the longest time, has had travel restrictions, nothing new. Venezuela, it's about the diplomats. But in reality, this is about the Muslim majority countries, and it's just a start. I want to bring to the podium now Fred Sau, who's with the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, ICER.
Okay. Good morning. On behalf of the Illinois Coalition for Immigrant and Refugee Rights, we are proud to stand here today with our Muslim brothers and sisters, with refugee advocates and allies against this latest travel ban. Bans like this are, bans like this are wrong on so many levels. They're unwise. They deny our country the talent, the work, the energy, the care, and yes, the spending power that immigrants and travelers bring to our country. They are lazy. They categorize people based on their country of origin and more basically their religion instead of their individual circumstance. And because they are lazy, they are also unconstitutional. Sweeping, as two federal judges have found, they sweep way too broadly and categorically. And most basically, they are un-American. They turn their back on our country's long history of welcoming immigrants, refugees, and travelers from every country. We are better than this as a nation. And we will continue to fight any attempt to degrade our country by imposing such unwise, unconstitutional, and un-American policies. Thank you.
It is important to mention as well that de facto and in effect, we're seeing Muslims being denied visas from different countries all over the world. This is already happening. Muslim ban or not, we are seeing a change in the State Department's tactics and how it interviews people and the kind of people that are being denied. We have a program called TAP, the Travelers Assistance Project. The website is tapus.org. It's a public service that we put out to the community so that they can register their travelers and their loved ones before they come, and we can provide them with legal help upon arrival. And we find that many people from various Muslim countries are being removed, detained, put into secondary screening more than ever before. One of the communities most affected has been the Syrian community, both as refugees and as immigrants. And with us today is Suzanne Sahlul, founder and executive director of the Syrian Community Network.
Good morning. Suzanne, S-U-Z-A-N-N-E, S-A-N-N-E, Sahlul, S-A-H-L-O-U-L, L-O-U-L. My name is Suzanne Sahlul. I'm the executive director of the Syrian Community Network, a nonprofit organization founded here in Chicago, working to resettle refugees with dignity. We have chapters in San Diego, Atlanta, and Phoenix. I'm speaking to you as an American of Syrian descent, a Muslim, and a woman speaking on behalf of Syrian refugee community and standing for anyone who is affected by the Muslim ban 3.0, now halted. We are deeply disappointed at the decision of President Trump to place a third ban on immigrants and refugees from Muslim-majority countries. This decision goes against American values and humanitarian principles. The Muslim ban 3.0 would bar immigrants from entering the country that was built on the premise of being open to people who are fleeing persecution and oppression. Just to give you an idea, Syrian refugees have to go through the most stringent vetting process that takes them about 24 months to complete before being considered for resettlement in the United States. The Syrian crisis has entered its 7th year with no end in sight. Today, over 65 million people are displaced worldwide. Close to 6 million Syrians have registered as refugees. 1 in 4 refugees in the world is Syrian. Only 18,000 out of the 5 million Syrian refugees have entered the United States. Most of them are families with women and children. They are adapting quickly in their new host cities. They are embraced by all faith groups. The new executive order of President Trump, due to start today and now halted, is unfair and will send the wrong message to the world. Refugees are fleeing oppression and terrorism, and they want to start a new life in the land of freedom and opportunity. Refugees deserve our sympathy and support. They are assets to our communities. Yesterday, a federal judge in Hawaii issued the temporary restraining order on President Trump's executive order just hours before it was scheduled to go into effect. One family here in Chicago stands out. Dr. Firas Jawish and his wife, Rehab al-Qadi. Dr. Jawish was imprisoned in Syria and tortured, and upon coming to the United States, he's studying to be recertified as a doctor, and his wife just passed her recertification test to become an engineer, and we're so proud of them. If left unchecked, Trump's policy would keep families apart and prevent thousands of refugees from finding safety in the United States. This is not who we are. And we are called on to stand with refugees and the immigrant community, and to stand with our undocumented brothers and sisters. As Americans, we are standing up for our principles and values, and I hope you will join us. Thank you.
While this ban affects Muslims, Muslims do not stand alone in fighting back. We have had the privilege of having various American communities stand with us, because this is about America. Prime among them has been the Jewish community, who has stood by us since day one, who have told us that we've been through this before and we won't let you go through it alone. The Jewish Council on Urban Affairs are one of those organizations that have been at the fore, and primarily among the attorneys with this group and in general, Kalman Resnick has been a great help to the TAP program. I now ask him to step forward and share his thoughts with us.
Good morning. I have a copy of my statement if anyone wants a copy. For the past 53 years, the Jewish Council on Urban Affairs has served as the Jewish voice for social justice and positive change in the Chicago metropolitan area. Working in partnership with our allies in diverse communities, the JCUA combats the root causes of poverty, inequality, racism, Islamophobia, and anti-Semitism. In solidarity with the Muslim community, the JCUA stands today in opposition to President Trump's latest effort to ban Muslims, his proclamation of September 24, 2017, which has been blocked by 2 district courts. Chapter 19 of Leviticus, the 3rd book of the Hebrew Bible, commands us to welcome the stranger and treat the stranger as our equal. When a stranger sojourns with you in your land, you shall do him no wrong. The stranger who sojourns with you shall be to you as the native among you, and you shall love him as yourself, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. Trump's proclamation and his administration's other efforts to bar Muslims from the United States violate this biblical command. As Jews, we know all too well the harm that immigration restrictions based on religion and nationality cause. In 1924, a Republican-controlled Congress enacted the National Origins Quota Act to restrict the entry of Jews and others considered undesirable. The number of Jews able to immigrate to the United States dropped precipitously on account of these quotas. As a result, most Jews who tried to flee Europe during the Holocaust were barred from entering the United States. Many of the 6 million Jews who were murdered during the Holocaust could have been saved had it not been for these restrictive quotas. As an immigration lawyer, let me share a few examples of how Trump's latest Muslim ban would impact our country. First and foremost, tens of thousands of Muslim Americans would be barred from petitioning for their spouses, children, parents, and siblings to join them in the United States. If the courts allow the proclamation to go into effect, these families face permanent separation from their loved ones. Universities would be unable to accept international students, employ professors and researchers, or invite speakers, and American employers would be unable to recruit the most talented employees without considering whether the proclamation would bar them from entering the United States. While the nation's focus has been on Trump's executive orders and proclamation, the U.S. Departments of State and Homeland Security have been implementing other schemes, including enhanced screening and extreme vetting, which are denying Muslims immigrant and non-immigrant visas, regardless of their nationality, and barring large numbers of Muslims entry at U.S. airports, even when they have visas. We cannot allow Trump to implement his latest proclamation or any of the other schemes which the administration has devised to institute the Muslim ban. Never again is now. The JCUA and the Jewish community stand in solidarity with Muslim Americans in opposition to all efforts by the Trump administration to ban Muslims from our country. Thank you.
One of Chicago's great organizations that has been providing direct services to families for so long is the Arab American Family Services. And with us here today to address us is Haneen Amra from Arab American Family Services.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Haneen Amra, and I work for the Arab American Family Services, a nonprofit organization that is based in Bridgeview. First and foremost, I wanted to thank you all here today for coming out and supporting, as it is specifically a very personal issue for me, as I am a Muslim American. In light of the decision that was made yesterday by the federal judge in Hawaii to temporarily halt the travel ban 3.0, we are gathered here today to ensure that this block will be upheld by courts and to also restate the fact that we firmly stand against the Muslim ban and any more of its kind. Hiding behind the facade of national security, we have witnessed Trump advocating for the first travel ban and to it evolving into the second and now on to the third. This third iteration of the travel ban just demonstrates Trump's relentless efforts in blocking Muslims into our country. His rhetoric continues to normalize such unconstitutional and discriminatory ideologies in our democratic country, a place which prides itself on religious freedom. Religious freedom is one of the pillars of this country, and any violation on that right should threaten us all. He is making our home unwelcoming for the refugee mother escaping a war zone with her children to a father seeking better opportunity for his kids. Patients seeking treatment are being delayed, and students' education are being disrupted. We cannot idly stand by when this unconstitutional ban is being advocated for, and to allow for acts which echo some of the most shameful parts of our history to repeat itself. The state of Illinois must firmly stand against such discriminatory acts against any particular group, whether based on their religious faith or where they come from. And the Illinois Trust Act was recently passed a few months ago, and we are now currently working on towards passing a no registry resolution in Senate towards the end of this month. If passed, this resolution will not only protect Muslims that are now being targeted by Trump's rhetoric, but will also prevent any future registry. We want to ensure that the state of Illinois continues to be a welcoming community, and I am hopeful that the good conscious people of Illinois will not allow for any registry for any community. Thank you.
Our second to last speaker will be Timna Axel from the Chicago Committee for Civil Rights.
Good morning. My name is Timna Axel. I'm here representing Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, an organization that was founded in the crucible of our nation's civil rights movement and still working to secure racial equity and economic justice for all. Today we join arms with Muslim and immigrant communities to say loudly and clearly, this travel ban is an assault on Muslims and for all of us in this country. Islamophobia, racism, and fear of the other are at the heart of this executive order, as they have fueled the first and the second travel bans that were rightly enjoined by courts across this nation. President Trump claims to be protecting America from terrorism, but this order continues a long and ugly history of stoking fear in order to scapegoat communities of color, religious minorities, and immigrants. During World War II, we turned away Jews fleeing Nazi Germany, and we incarcerated hundreds of thousands of Japanese Americans in the name of national security. In the 1980s and 90s, there were calls to register and to quarantine HIV-positive individuals and gay men for fear of AIDS. And the baseless fear of black and brown criminality continues to justify segregation in our neighborhoods and our schools, and mass incarceration of people of color. Many of us have been made to feel like the other throughout our history, and again in recent days. Today, Muslim Americans and those who are perceived to be Muslims are experiencing a rising tide of everyday harassment, violent threats, and hate crimes. Our Hate Crime Project gets calls from men, women, teens, and children who have been called hateful epithets and then threatened or attacked. Many of them tell us that they are afraid to report these incidents to police for fear of how they will be treated and where their information will end up. We know that political rhetoric does inflame tension and increase violence against marginalized communities. This travel ban attempts to legitimize hate-fueled stereotypes about Muslims and immigrants, but we will not give ground to Islamophobia and xenophobia here. We stand proudly with our partners and our allies to say, end the travel ban now.
Our last speaker is Mohammed Sankari, and he's with the Arab American Action Network, one of the
Everybody, welcome back to News and Now. I'm joined by a former astronaut, Terry Virts, who is going to be speaking at the Mesa Arts Center this evening, and it's going to be all about your life in space.
Yeah, I'm excited about it. It's a National Geographic sponsored speaker series, and I talk about my time in space and some of the lessons that I learned. Super excited about being there. And
first question, I think that you probably always get, all right, what's it like in space?
So it's amazing. It's not like being on Earth. The two things that really stand out to me are floating, like everything floats. So you have to learn how to move around and take care of stuff. You know, this would be everything would be floating. So you have to learn that. And the view is amazing. It's not, the pictures that we have are great. I have this book out, View from Above. It's a photography book, but when you actually see it in person, it's kind of overwhelming.
Oh, I bet. And what was some of your favorite sights to see of Earth when you were high above?
So that's the problem with flying in space. Your bucket list gets way too long. But the aurora was amazing. I love seeing thunderstorms at night, like over Africa and the Amazon. They're incredible. The deserts are amazing. The Sahara is gigantic. Namibia, I remember the first time I saw Namibia, I thought, those are some big sand dunes down there. And then I looked into it, and they are actually the biggest sand dunes on Earth. The Bahamas are incredible. Kamchatka doesn't look like Earth. It looks like Venus. They have these crazy volcanoes there. So there's just lots and lots of places on the planet that are in the book and in my talk that I had never knew about until I saw them from space.
And what are some other questions that people ask you that when they find out you were an astronaut?
So what's it like in space? How did you adapt back to Earth when you come back to Earth? For me personally, physically I was in great shape. I had done a lot of exercise every day. They give you 2.5 hours a day. And but for me, it was dizzy. I mean, I was really, really dizzy. Like, I could walk, I could lay down and stand up. They have you do all this painful stuff as a test. I just didn't like it. The first day, I was really dizzy. The second day, it wasn't too bad. And I recovered way faster than I thought I would. I thought half a year in space would take some time. And I was like, the day after I got back, my son turned 16. And gotten his license while I was in space, and he was like, all right, Dad, we're going car shopping. So he took me car shopping 24 hours after I landed.
Wow, wow. You're getting right back into it.
Yeah.
And now, did you fly on the shuttle?
My first space flight was on Endeavour.
Okay.
Which is in Los Angeles now, at the Los Angeles Science Center. And that was a space station assembly flight. It was the final one. And then this most recent flight was with the Russians on a Soyuz. And that was a much different experience, but the Soyuz was just a few hours. 199 of my 200 days were on the space station.
Okay, wow. Yeah. And how does the shuttle compare to the other takeoff?
It's completely different. Well, the launch is the shuttle is like a giant muscle car, and the Soyuz is like a little sports car.
Okay.
But you're like this is the way it is in the Soyuz. You and the three people. The shuttle is this big airliner. But the big difference is landing. The shuttle lands like an airplane. Hopefully, I was a pilot, so as long as the pilot does a good job, just like on Southwest, usually you get a good landing, sometimes not.
Yes.
But we had a great landing. But our Soyuz is like a bowling ball with a parachute, so it just is a giant thud on the desert.
Yeah. And then lastly, Terry, what do you think about the future of the space program for the U.S.?
I think a lot about it, actually. I've just wrote a few articles for NBC and Ars Technica about what I think we should be doing. Right now, we're all about the space station. So the space station operations are going great. We fly 4 Americans a year to the space station. We do a lot of science there. So that part is doing well. What we need to do is come up with a vision for the future, and that's been lacking drastically for the last decade or so. Yeah. So hopefully there's a new space council. Some different folks are going to hopefully put a program together. But beyond having that, you need to actually fund it, which is important. And then beyond having a vision and funding it, you need to not change it every 4 years.
That's true.
So I've had a chance to talk to lots of folks in Washington, and I always tell them the challenge is not the rocket science, it's the political science. And that's the hard part about space.
It must be hard with different administrations. They have different views.
They want to, usually the new administration doesn't like the last administration, so they cancel everything, and we need to figure out a way. And NASA's not political. NASA's not red or blue.
Yes.
It's space. And I laugh when I talk to folks in Washington. They're just nodding, and they love that political science, rocket science analogy. And they're like, you're right. If it wasn't for the guys on the other side of the aisle, we could be doing this. And it's like, that's my whole point. You know,
yes.
It's not a political hot potato. It should be all Americans want to do this in partnership with other nations. It's an international thing.
So is Mars still far off?
It doesn't have to be that far off with the right. I think if we can get a bipartisan plan together in America and then lead an international partnership, it doesn't have to be that far off. It's not going to happen in the next couple of years. And that's the problem. It's never going to happen in this president's administration.
Yes. And then there's going to be another.
This president has to be willing to start and fund a plan that future presidents will take credit for. You know?
There you go.
So, which is hard to do in today's environment.
Absolutely. Well, Terry, we appreciate your insight. And tonight at the Mesa Art Center, you're going to be talking and talking about your book as well. And
about my experiences in space. It should be a lot of fun. There's some tickets left. I think it's mostly sold out, but there's still some tickets left.
All right, Terry, thank you so much.
Thanks.
Welcome back, everyone, here to News and Now. Taking a look at the 10-day Foxcast. We're looking at 93 degrees here, and it's going to cool off a little bit Saturday and Sunday, 86 and 91 degrees. So we'll take it. A little bit hot today, but you know what? We live in Arizona. We could expect this. Hi, everybody. Mike Page. As we continue on here with News Now, we are still awaiting that NFL press conference from the commissioner, Roger Goodell. That was promised about an hour ago, so we are still in a holding pattern. As soon as I see that press briefing happening, of course, I will bring that to you guys as well. Also happening a little bit later, White House press briefing. We'll take that when we get it available to us. But happening right now at Capitol Hill, Attorney General Jeff Sessions is back taking questions from senators. Let's continue to listen in here, and I'll be monitoring these feeds as we continue on here with the news now.
It's morally wrong, or raises the question, such as whether a business owner who has a demonstratively false religious belief that all vaccines contain fetal stem cell tissue or cause autism and believes that providing coverage of vaccinations to his employees is a substantial burden on his free exercise rights. So, Mr. Attorney General, I would say that these 20 principles, religious principles, I only cited to one that raises the kind of concerns that I have. Let me go on to another question. LGBTQ rights. In a case argued earlier this year before the Second Circuit, the Zarda case, your department submitted a brief and argued that Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964 does not prohibit discrimination on the basis of sexual orientation. And I believe that you expanded that in a directive to include sexual identity. And this is inconsistent with the 2015 EEOC guidance and also with a recent en banc decision from the Seventh Circuit Court of Appeals. Does it violate federal law to fire an employee because they are gay?
We carefully reviewed the law on that. My staff has. Since the 1964 Civil Rights Act, of which Title VII is a part, it has been interpreted that way. All circuit courts of appeals had interpreted that way, except this year there was a reversal, I believe the Seventh Circuit you indicated. So the position we have taken in the litigation is consistent with the President Obama's Department of Justice, all but one of the courts of appeals, and it's been that way for quite a long time. So we took the lawful position. It's distinctly the minority position to hold otherwise.
I just need to have that clarified, Mr.
Senator Feinstein now for 5 minutes for the second round.
Thanks very much. Mr. Attorney General, under federal law, fugitives cannot legally purchase or possess guns. It's my understanding that 8 months ago, the Justice Department issued a memo redefining who qualifies as a fugitive from justice. And since then, more than 500,000 names of fugitives with outstanding arrest warrants have been removed from the FBI's National Instant Criminal Background Check, known as NICS. We're hearing from local law enforcement which has concern about this. Why did the department reject the FBI's view that the law blocks sales to anyone with an arrest warrant?
I'll have to review that. Senator Feinstein, I would.
Oh, good. Thank you.
I would assume it's because there's no conviction.
Well, I would like to know the detail of that.
I should know, but I don't.
You probably should want to know, too. Let me, for a moment, on the dark web. The New York Times ran a tragic piece about the use of the dark web by drug traffickers and other criminal enterprises to secretly do business with users. So it seems to me that the problem of the dark web being used by criminals is going to grow in the coming years. Do you have any plans to address it, or would you begin to think about it so that we might have some conversations on this? Because I think there's a lot of concern out there in law enforcement communities about the dark web being used to commit crime.
I would be pleased to do so. We are very concerned about that. The FBI is very concerned about it.
Used to commit crime.
I would be pleased to do so. We are very concerned about that. The FBI is very concerned about that. And they did take down, I think, the two biggest dark websites. This last one, Alpha Bay, we took down recently. They had 240,000 sites where individuals were selling, for the most part, illegal substances or guns on that site, including fentanyl. And they use bitcoins and other untraceable financial capabilities, and it is a big problem.
Thank you. I'd like to work with you on it if it requires legislation in particular. So thank you very much. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead.
Okay. Senator Whitehouse.
Thank you very much. Attorney General Sessions, I'd like to pick up where we left off on this question of executive privilege. You've had a number of questioners since, so let me refresh your recollection. We were talking about the process under the Reagan 1982 order for the assertion of executive privilege, and your concluding remarks were about the importance that there actually be an executive privilege so that the president can have conversations with his immediate staff and cabinet members and so forth. And that is a principle that I think everyone in this room agrees to. There is an offsetting principle, which is that Congress has the power of oversight over the executive branch. And as best I can tell, where those two conflicting principles come together is in that 1982 Reagan order. And that I think you've conceded that though that is the prevailing order right now under which the Department of Justice is operating. So I go back to that order which says that executive privilege shall not be invoked without specific presidential authorization. As we go on through the order, as we discussed, there is a provision that allows for a temporary, not even properly assertion of executive privilege. It's described as a request to the Congress to hold in abeyance their request for information while the executive branch makes the determination whether or not to assert executive privilege. So, and I get that. It makes perfect sense that there should be a period of abeyance, and whether it's a big document request that comes in and you need a time to sort through it and determine what should be subject to executive privilege and what should not, or whether it's a live question from a requesting senator that may touch on executive privilege and you've got to make that temporary assertion because you can't make that call necessarily from your chair at that moment. I get all of that. Here's my problem. I don't see any effort on the part of the administration to ever get a specific presidential authorization for the assertion of executive privilege as to anything. And there were some very specific questions that were asked of you in the Intelligence Committee, one by Senator Warner. To your knowledge, have any Department of Justice officials been involved with conversations about any possibility of presidential pardons about any of the individuals involved with the Russian investigation? And another from Senator Heinrich asking if the president ever expressed his frustration to you regarding your decision to recuse yourself. Now, in both of those cases, I think you appropriately did not respond because of the abeyance period while you had a chance to sort out whether those are questions as to which the president wished to seek executive privilege. Right?
I think so. I think I understand.
But at some point, he's got to assert executive privilege. You can't just have that period of abeyance go into the indefinite future consistent with the executive order under which you are operating. Can you?
The way it's been done historically, as I understand it, is specific requests have been made. Various steps occur. If agreement is not reached, an accommodation process is supposed to occur, and see if this can't be fixed in some way outside of litigation. Often, most of these are documents. I'm unaware of the Supreme Court ever saying that Congress has a right to inquire of the president's private conversations between top cabinet officials.
It actually works the other way around, according to President Reagan, which is that Congress has the ability to inquire into absolutely anything, and that congressional requests for information are to be complied with as promptly and fully as possible, unless unless there is an assertion of executive privilege. The default is that you have to answer our questions. It's only when there's an assertion of executive privilege that that default is no longer the case. And while there is a period of abeyance, what I'm worried about is that this administration is de facto rewriting Ronald Reagan's executive order about executive privilege so that the period of abeyance has no end to it. And Congress is stonewalled on information without ever getting an assertion of executive privilege, an assertion to which I believe we are entitled if we're going to be prevented from getting information.
Well, as you indicated, you have quite the ability to work your way through the complexities of this. I would say we're not at that point. I believe before you have an assertion of executive privilege by the president, he must know precisely what it is that he's being asked to provide, number one. And he also has a right to be informed as to why his privilege is of high value, why it should be waived in exchange for.
All right, there. So there's a little bit of issue with that feed there, but we're taking a live look now at the NFL headquarters in New York City, still waiting on NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell. This is all going to have to do with the NFL owners meeting that happened yesterday, and also we are going to be hearing a lot about the players that choose not to stand for the national anthem or the American flag. So we'll be hearing a lot about that as well. As you know, the reporters will be asking about President Trump's comments about the NFL and what he thinks the players should do. He thinks they should all stand for the national anthem. So that's all coming up next here on the Fox 10 and News Now stream as we continue to monitor feeds from all over the country. We continue to wait here. Looks like we have our feed, though, back from Capitol Hill. So let's go back to that right now while we do wait.
Talking about, but I've had the same problem with previous attorney generals and got answers similar to what you're giving, Senator Sessions. So I would say that I'm going to read now. When Attorney General Holder was in that chair, I asked him questions about why he would not give us information about the department's false statements that were made to this committee about gun walking in Fast and Furious. The information I was asking for had nothing to do with communications with the president and did not implicate any constitutional privilege. Still, he wouldn't answer. And then Chairman Levy didn't direct him to do so. Then at another time, when almost the exact same questions you've been asked sometimes, Senators or General Sessions, when Holder testified on Fast and Furious, he said the exact same thing that Attorney General Sessions is saying today. Quoting Holder, "We will act in a way that is consistent with what other attorneys generals have made determinations as to what information can be shared with congressional oversight committees, and these are Republican as well as Democrat attorneys general, and I will act in a manner that is consistent with the history and the tradition of the department." Then I said, "You're refusing to provide drafts of that February 4th letter," that goes way back to 2010 or 2011, "and emails about the drafts, even though they have been subpoenaed by the House without a valid constitutional privilege that, of course, risks contempt of Congress. Why would you risk contempt of Congress to prevent us from finding out who reviewed the drafts of that letter and whether they knew that they contained false statements?" This is what the Attorney General Holder said. "Well, I will certainly try to work with you in providing you all the relevant information that we can. We will, however, act in a way that is consistent with what other attorneys generals have made determinations as to what information can be shared with congressional oversight committees, and these are Republican as well as Democrat attorneys generals, and I'll act in a manner that's consistent with the history and tradition of the department." Senator Leahy is next for second round, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You know, I think it's general acceptance, certainly the people who are here, the press knows this, that Rod Rosenstein's May 9th memorandum tying Director Comey's firing to his handling of the Clinton investigation served as a pretext. President Trump fired Director Comey due to the Russia investigation. President Trump has said as much. Now, the press recently reported an earlier unsent letter penned by President Trump that justified firing Director Comey because of the Russia investigation. One of the reports said you were involved in discussion in the Oval Office. My concern is you were part of the Russian facade and went along with it. And I'm sorry. I've known you for years, and I'm sorry you would do that. Now, let me ask you another area. President Trump says he believes the Cuban government is responsible for sonic attacks against our diplomats. I've read all the reports. We can't find anything that connects the Cuban government to those sonic attacks. In fact, I doubt they have the capability for such a thing. Cubans, after this gone on for a while, we finally told them about it. They said, bring the FBI down, bring your FBI, something they'd never allowed before. I said, please feel free. It took us weeks to get around to doing that. Do you know of any evidence to support the president's assertion that the Cuban government is responsible? Now, we're not talking about privilege here because he said this openly. Do you share the president's conclusion the Cuban government is responsible?
Well, I almost called you Mr. Chairman again. Why do I keep doing that?
Don't worry about it.
I don't know. Senator Grassley might get upset with me. I did serve a long time under your chairmanship. So it did hurt me to say you think I'm part of a facade.
Welcome, everyone, here to News Now. Coming up on 11 o'clock, you're taking a live look at downtown Phoenix here from our tower cam. Hi, everybody. Welcome to News Now. I'm Mike Page. Happy to be here with you for the afternoon session here of News Now, where we are continuing to take feeds from all over the country. And, of course, when breaking news does occur, you know we have you covered right here on News Now. Here's what I'm monitoring right now here for you guys. In New York City, we are waiting for the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell to do a press briefing. This was just a day after an owners meeting in New York City. So we're going to be hearing from Roger Goodell and the future of players either standing or kneeling for the national anthem and American flag. This is a press briefing you are not going to want to miss. And then also happening on Capitol Hill right now, Attorney General Jeff Sessions' testimony to senators is happening right now, Capitol Hill. They're ranging everything from Russia investigations to immigration and the border wall. Let's listen into a little bit here while we continue to wait once again for Roger Goodell. And as always, when breaking news does occur, I'll jump into that as well. Looks like it could be happening at any moment now. Let's stay right here for just a second. Could be coming up any moment right now. We do know that yesterday, Roger Goodell did a brief, and I mean brief, press briefing to the media yesterday, and it really he only allowed one question. And we did learn that Roger Goodell yesterday said that he will not tell the players whether they can't stand or kneel for the national anthem. So we're hoping to learn a lot more about his thoughts and his policies regarding the NFL. It looked like it was about to begin there. The camera zoomed out. We'll continue to monitor this for you right here on News Now. Let's get back to Capitol Hill. Attorney General Jeff Sessions, it looks like this could be starting at any moment, so we could be pulling back in a short while.
You were incorrect in the quote to him, and I
asked him if he could provide a single example of a DACA recipient involved in terrorist activity, and he said he was not aware of any examples. Is that inaccurate?
Well, most importantly, I want to correct that my comments did not focus solely on DACA recipients. It was others that entered the country unlawfully.
Have you? Well, that's.
I believe that's correct summary of the matter.
I read it back to your civil division chief, and he said he did not know of a single example of a DACA recipient involved in terrorist activity.
Well, we know there are 2,000 that have already been taken off as DACA recipients for serious criminal crimes, including drugs and capital murder and rape.
The Cato Institute has found that dreamers are less likely to be incarcerated than native-born Americans with the same age and education profiles, and the Cato Institute is not some left-wing.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
All right, as you can see, Roger Goodell at the podium. Let's listen in.
Before I get to your questions, please announce Dallas draft. This is the first time we'll be hosting the draft at a stadium.
All right, it looks like they're having some audio issues right there. We're going to monitor this for you right now.
For really doing an extraordinary job to raise the bar. They have set a new standard for the draft, created a new experience for our fans that we think will be extraordinary. And we are confident that Dallas will raise that bar even further. So I'm happy to introduce Charlotte Jones Anderson, who is going to give her view of what to expect in Dallas. Again, the ownership was very supportive, and we're all very excited to be going to Dallas next April for the draft. Charlotte.
Thank you, Roger. Thank you. Well, on behalf of the Dallas Cowboys, the city of Dallas, the city of Arlington, and the city of Frisco, we are so excited that the NFL has given us this opportunity to host the draft in April of next year. And we have had so many great civic leaders in Dallas and across from Arlington and beyond that have really done a lot of hard work here, hopefully giving a lot of ideas to the staff at the NFL, to Peter and his team. And we really think we have come up with an incredible idea and concept that will really make AT&T Stadium shine, but also will deliver a unique experience that is unlike anything that you have seen thus far at the NFL draft. But I think this is what the draft process is all about. It allows the cities to show their unique personality and hopefully invite not only fans from all over our region in Dallas and the Metroplex and beyond, but from those from out of state, that we welcome them to come to Dallas, to come to Arlington, to AT&T Stadium, to show their fandom and be a part of the draft in April. So you'll see a little bit different variation of it when you get there. A lot of those surprises are in store and will be released throughout the next few months. But again, we'd like to thank all of those who worked hard on this, but most importantly, the NFL for giving Dallas and the city of Arlington and AT&T Stadium the opportunity to host the draft. Thank you.
Any questions for Charlotte before she goes? I'm sure she doesn't want to stay for the rest of the show.
It's all you.
Okay, I'm sure you know. Okay, so we had a very productive set of meetings in New York here over the last couple of days. We had reports from various committees, including the Competition Committee. Very excited about the season that we have ongoing right now. We reviewed the 6 weeks that we've played to date and the margin of victory. We talked about the penalties per game. We talked about our game presentation and the changes that we've made and how that's worked. Talked about the focus on officiating. All very positive very positive feedback on the game.
We also spent a great deal of time talking about our partnerships. We extended a partnership and expanded a partnership with Ticketmaster that we think will be very fan-friendly, that will give our fans a better opportunity to buy tickets on a secure basis and give them to them on greater platforms, which we think will be very positive. And as always, we had a report on our health and safety and our initiatives there and the impact that that's having on our game. Lastly, we had a special visitor today. We had the commissioner of the NYPD, Jimmy O'Neill, and his chief of police, Terry Monahan. We have been at, and I specifically have had conversations with them for several months. So this has been quite a while in the making to try to understand how we can continue to expand the relationships between our clubs, our players, our communities, and the NFL. And he was very helpful in giving us insight into what their initiatives are here with the NYPD, initiatives that are going on in other parts of the country, of which I saw firsthand down in Miami as an example last week and saw in Philadelphia recently. The relationship between the players and our communities and our law enforcement is very important to us. So that was very helpful. And yesterday, as you know, I made a brief comment about, came down to see you. I'm sure there'll be more questions about our meeting with the players and owners yesterday. We also spent a great deal of time with our owners alone today, discussing our efforts with our players. I would tell you that there's a great deal of support for the efforts that our players have identified. Not only support, but a recognition these are important issues for our communities. They're American issues and certain things that we really want to, as clubs and as a league, want to not only support, but also be a part of and try to help lead with our players. I think those are the key issues. I would tell you, though, just on one other issue that we spent a great deal of time talking about this morning was how much we believe everyone should stand for the national anthem. That's an important part of our policy. It's also an important part of our game that we all take great pride in. And it's also important for us to honor our flag and to our country. And we think our fans expect us to do that. And so that is something that we continue to focus on this morning, but really talking a lot about the opportunity that exists with our players to try to go and really make a difference in our communities in a positive way. So I'll let you take questions.
Your statement yesterday, the president this morning tweeted that both you and the league have disrespect for the country. Is he wrong about that?
Well, as I just said, we respect our country, respect our flag, respect our national anthem. I think you look at our clubs and what they do on a daily basis. I think we look at our players and what they do and how they participate in that. We all feel very strongly about our country and our pride, and we're going to continue to do that.
January 8, 2015, on David Letterman, he himself expressed support for flag burning. So it doesn't make any sense.
Well, listen, I understand that we're focusing on what we can do and what we should be doing as an NFL. I think we have a great opportunity here with our players to really work together and to try to help and make differences in our community. Things that we all believe are necessary to do. And that's what we're going to do.
We have a game operating manual with players who be on the field for the national anthem, stand at attention, hold the helmets in their hands. It's not a rule, but it's in the policy. So why not make it a rule? Since fans seem to want it, ratings seem to be down because of the protest. Why not make it a rule?
Well, I think one of the things we need to keep a focus on is, again, we believe that our players should stand for the national anthem. That's an important part of our game and our moments, and we believe in that. I think we also have to keep focus on this. We have about 6 or 7 players that are involved with this protest at this point. And this is something that what we've tried to do is deal with the underlying issue and understand what it is that they're protesting and try to address that matter. And so let me finish, if you can. So the important thing for us is to be able to do that and take that opportunity to make real differences in our community. And that is really what's going to ultimately be the important aspect for us long term, because this is a long-term issue. We need to make sure we do that in the right way.
Would you agree that the image is suffering?
I understand where our fans feel about this issue, and we feel the same way about the importance of our flag, about the importance of patriotism, and I believe our players feel that way. They will state to you, and they have stated to everyone publicly, they are not doing this in any way to be disrespectful to the flag, but they also understand how it's being interpreted, and that's why we're trying to deal with those underlying issues.
Thank you, Roger. Jim Trotter here, ESPN.
I don't know where you are, Jim,
right here in the middle,
Yes.
right here. You said you want the players to stand, and there's been no change to the game operations manual. My question is, what happens if an owner who still feels that he can discipline a player for taking a knee? What response will we see from the league if that were to happen?
Well, Jim, we just had 2 days of conversations with our owners, of which, this was a fair amount of the conversation. And I think our clubs all see this the same way, that we want our players to stand. We're going to continue to encourage them to stand, and we're going to continue to work on these issues in the community. We'll address issues. I can't deal with hypotheticals right now. We'll deal with those issues if they come up. But for us right now, that's our focus.
Mark Maskey. Roger, over here.
Yeah,
at this point, what have your sponsors and the network said to you about this issue, and what do you feel the effect is on your business right now of this entire?
Yeah, Mark, we had a report on that too. Listen, we know how important this is to our sponsors, our partners, our licensees. It's important to us also. So we all share that, and we certainly are in great contact with them. We understand the issues. We want to make sure they understand our perspective of what we're doing. And in fact, if they can help us, we want them to help us in those issues. But all of this is part of the ongoing effort and understanding one another and making sure that we do the right thing in our communities and the right thing to support our players, but also do the right thing to make sure we get back to football. And in the meantime, people understand how important our country is and how important it is to make sure that we're doing things the right way to honor our country.
Roger, Byron Barnett from WHDH in Boston. What is your reaction to the lawsuit filed against the NFL by the Aaron Hernandez family and their allegation that the NFL doesn't inform the players about the risks of CTE?
Listen, this is a matter of litigation, so that's something that's going to work its way through the litigation. I think there's been a great deal of focus on this issue of brain trauma. We've been through a great deal of litigation on this issue and settled a major case on concussion, so we'll let the lawyers handle that and deal with it. Yes.
Roger, Ron Mott, NBC News.
I'm sorry, you guys, I can't see you.
Hi,
Yes.
Roger. Ron Mott, NBC News.
Yes.
When you talk about supporting your players, what form or forms will that take? Because some people reasonably presume that if players felt that this league were truly on their side and supporting them in these causes and these concerns, that they would not take a knee. So how is this going to manifest itself going forward? Is the league willing to put the shield on the line to get into some sticky political and social debates?
Okay, but we're not afraid of the tough conversations. That's what we're having with our players. That's what we had yesterday to make sure we understand one another and understand where they're coming from. And I think out of those discussions, they understand that the owners and the NFL really do care about their issues and what we can do to make the communities better. And so I think that's what dialogue's all about, and listening and understanding so that we can get that kind of understanding between different parties. And that's what is complex about this, but that's why it's also really important to do, because I think that's where real change really happens, and that's the opportunity for us in our communities. For over a year, and I think we have a very good understanding of the types of things that they're interested in and how they can get support from the NFL to do that, and we want to do that. And that could be in legislative matters, that can be in the community with, can we participate in ride-alongs and try to make sure we understand what's going on in different communities across the nation. Because the problems in one market are different than the problems in another market. And so that involves the clubs and the players getting together and making sure we truly understand what's going on in those markets. And that's where we see a real impact.
All right, Roger Connell, McShane with the Fox Business Network. And I do want to ask you a business-related question to the league. One of the things we've seen in the polling this week, Gallup had numbers that showed the popularity of pro football started to come down, but they also showed there's a big political divide whereas, Republicans identifying as pro football fans down 15%, Democrats only 3%. So it doesn't directly speak to the anthem protests, but what's your reaction to those numbers, and what, if any, steps can be taken to reverse that trend?
Well, we believe doing the right thing is what you ultimately have to do. And I think listening to our players, understanding our players, trying to address those underlying issues, and making our communities better is where the real opportunity is. And that long term is going to benefit us. And so that's what our focus is, and that's how we're going to deal with it.
What about that split, though? That split between the parties, the political.
I don't think that surprises anybody. What we're trying to do is stay out of politics. We're not looking to get into politics. What we're looking to do is continue to keep people focused on football.
Commissioner,
people come.
Commissioner, you've been talking about. You just said.
Yes. Ma'am, just a second.
Thank you, Commissioner. As you've said, you've been in discussions now for over a year. More discussions over the past day and a half or so. Realistically,
And welcome back here to News Now. Taking a live look of Roger Goodell, the NFL commissioner, at the podium talking about players standing or not standing for the national anthem. Let's continue to listen in.
But we want to make sure that we're understanding what the players are talking about, and that's complex. And we've taken the time, I personally have taken the time to go on those ride-alongs and to go and figure out what are the things in our communities that our players are expressing. And our clubs have a much better understanding of that from the meetings over the last several weeks, to hear directly from those players and do the tough work to try to understand what is it we need to accomplish together. And that's what I think is really the opportunity and what's really happening. So, yes, Judy, I see that. I can't hear you, Judy. I'm sorry.
Roger, did you come out of the meetings with the owners with an understanding that teams that have indicated they would discipline their own players for not standing will not discipline them?
No, we didn't discuss that. It wasn't necessary. We had a real focus on making sure that all of our teams understood the kind of dialogue that took place, the kind of things that they were interested in getting support from them. And there was complete support for the NFL, each club supporting their players, and continuing the dialogue that they've had on the club level. I would tell you there's unprecedented conversations and dialogue going on between our players, between our owners, between our club officials, between the league, and that is a really positive change for us. And we think ultimately is going to pay dividends.
Productive meetings with the players. You personally, do you understand what they're protesting, and can you explain your understanding of that?
Yes, they're very clear about it, and they're actually incredibly knowledgeable, articulate, and they've spent the time to go into the communities and talk about that. And so they really, truly understand it. They're talking about criminal justice reform, whether it's bail reform, whether it's talking about sentencing, mandatory sentencing. They're talking about changes that I think will make our communities better, that there is bipartisan support for across our nation and that need focus. They're talking about what we can do to support them to effectuate that legislative change. And that's, again, very, very positive. They're talking about equality issues, making sure that we're doing everything we possibly can to give people an opportunity, whether it's in education or economic, and what we can do to try to effectuate that. And we believe with the players that we can help them, we can support them, and those are our issues, national issues, American issues, that are all important to deal with.
Was there
Roger. Last question. Roger, hey, two-part question here. Number one, have you communicated?
You're taking two questions?
Do you mind? Have you at all communicated with President Trump? Do you have any plans to communicate with President Trump? Second question is a football question. Pace of play. How happy are you with just the fact that it seems like the games are going quicker this year?
Yeah. I have not, to your first question. To the second question, we're very pleased with the pace of game changes. We've seen, in particular, what I call the double-ups, and that bother me so much on the commercial format. We've seen, I think it's close to a 90% reduction in that this year, which I think is good for our fans. I think it's good for the experience of watching an NFL game, whether you're in the stadium or on television or on another platform. And we said all along this wasn't about reducing the length of games, it was the pace of the game. And so the 40-second clocks, as an example, that we put in after the point after touchdown and after the touchdowns have had a real impact. Centralizing replay and bringing the Surface tablet to the sideline so the official can do it. All of that's sped up what we consider downtime, time that's not, we don't believe is attractive to our fans. So we're happy with it. It's only 6 weeks. We've got a long ways to go, but we're continuing to see what we can do to keep pushing that because we believe that's good for the experience. Okay. Thank you.
And that was the NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell taking a question, saying that everyone should stand for the anthem, but he would not say that he told NFL owners that they should fine any of the players for not standing. So really up in the air right there. Players can continue to do what they want to do, and that's really going to upset some of the fans as well. And then others, well, they side with the players. So it could be a 50-50 mix there. It all depends on how people feel. Hi, everybody. Mike Pace here as we continue on with News Now. We're going to be back in just a little bit, but we do continue to monitor. Jeff Sessions is still doing testimony right now, so we will have that for you a little bit later right here on News Now.
This is a Fox 10 News Alert.
And welcome everyone here to News Now. I'm Mike Pace. We start with this news alert in the Maryland area, in the Baltimore area of Maryland. There was a workplace shooting a couple hours ago, leaving 3 dead and 2 critically injured. Let's take you to that press briefing that just coming down our pipes now.
Shot here at the business behind us this morning, and again 3 are deceased. We hope that number, and we pray that number doesn't get any higher. The 2 who were taking the shock trauma remain in critical condition. I understand 1 just came out of surgery, remains in critical condition. We have not identified to 100% satisfaction those who have been shot or those who have been, well, we have identified those who have been lost today. So we are not going to be releasing any names at this point of victims in today's incident. we will confirm that the suspect in this case, he was an employee here. We have confirmed that. Worked here for about the last 4 months, and today was a scheduled work day for him. There's a lot of questions about an incident that took place in Wilmington, Delaware, a short time after the incident that occurred here in Harford County. We've been in contact, our investigators have been in contact with the Wilmington Police Department, and they have confirmed that the suspect in their incident, in their shooting event up there, is the suspect from today's shooting here, Mr. Prince. So they have issued a press release from the Wilmington Police Department that Ms. Kaler will be giving out as soon as we wrap up these remarks. Any questions related to their incident beyond that, I don't know the status of their victim, I don't know the relationship, need to be directed to the Wilmington Police Department. Again, we do know from their news release the suspect is still in that vehicle. That same tag number that we gave out earlier, I know there was an issue with the 0 that's not in there, but otherwise the same tag number that's in there, a 2008 black GMC Acadia, Delaware tag, P like Paul, C like Charles, 64273. Up to date, we have no information to say he has separated himself from that vehicle. So we are again just calling for the public's help not to try to encounter this suspect, but if you see him, please pick up the phone and call 911 and let your local law enforcement know. He's gone from Harford County up to Delaware. We don't know what his intentions are or what his next stop may be. Again, on behalf of the Sheriff of Harford County and the Sheriff's Office and our county partners, I have to thank our federal partners and our state partners. I received a call from Governor Hogan earlier. The county executive has been with us from the outset. So thank all of our partners for their assistance as we move through this, and our thoughts and prayers go out to the families who are suffering immeasurable loss here today. So with that, I'll take a few questions, and again, I'm going to qualify it with, if it's investigative, I'm probably not going to go into it.
Sheriff, what was the relationship?
We're going to give a few questions, sir.
Any indication of a motive?
None. Other than we know he worked here. We think it ties into the relationship here at work, but it was not. He was scheduled to work today. He was not separated.
Have there been any other police calls to this business? Anything else like that that might not be included?
None that I'm familiar with, but the investigators are digging.
Sheriff, have they determined the relationship between the suspect and the victims? Like, was one of the victims his boss? Anything like that?
I have not heard. And as far as I know, we haven't 100% identified all 3 of the deceased victims at this point.
Can you tell us about the birthday situation? Saying it was his anniversary on work or something?
It was a regular work day. He was scheduled to be at work today. He works here. He has worked here for 4 months, and it was scheduled to be a regular work day.
Can you confirm that he gathered those co-workers together for a meeting and then opened fire?
I'm not going to go. Some of the investigative part, I'm not going to go into that. Yes.
Have police communicated with the suspect's family?
We have been reaching out to, of course, the victims' families, those that we have identified, and we've opened the center up here at the Richland Ballroom, which we are going to be moving to our southern precinct here in the hours to come. We are reaching out to any acquaintances or family members of the suspect in an attempt to identify where he is and locate him.
Was this suspect known to your department beforehand?
I don't know what involvement, if any, we've had with him before. I do know that he has a criminal record. I still, up to this time, have not seen his complete criminal record.
So clearly you don't know.
Do you know his relationship to the second location, to this auto?
No idea. The one up in Delaware?
Yeah.
No idea.
Do you think perhaps he was trying to get another vehicle, or do you have any indication?
As far as that would have to go to the Wilmington Police Department. I truly have no idea, but even if I did, I would still defer the answer to Wilmington.
So clearly you don't know where he is because he's not in custody if you did.
Absolutely.
But he went from here to Delaware.
Right.
Should people here, should the guard be down?
Oh, absolutely
he's still
not.
in Wilmington? I mean,
no.
What are you telling people about it? Go up and down the highway.
Same thing. It only takes 20 minutes to get to Wilmington from here. Certainly, I wouldn't say be aware. He seems in this incident to have targeted his workplace. I don't know what the relationship is up there, but I still believe he's probably targeting for a specific reason and not general. It doesn't mean he's an armed killer out there. So certainly he is a danger to anyone he encounters. So we should be aware, and he's mobile. He could be back here in Harford County in 10 minutes.
Did he try to shoot everybody in this place right here, or just a select few?
Again, the investigation will have to pan out, but my suspicion is that if he could have shot more individuals, this incident would have resulted in a greater loss of life.
Sheriff, can you walk us through, to the extent you can you walk us through the timeline, what happened? Did he come into work and this happened moments after he got there? Can you walk us through?
Really, other than us receiving the call, for those who weren't here earlier, we received the first call. I actually don't have it on this sheet. Christy, do you have those? Where'd she go? 8:58. The first call came into the dispatch center, or at least our cars were dispatched at 8:58, and we were on scene 4 minutes later. So does that start the workday? I don't know what day the workday starts.
Sheriff Gaylor, do you believe he went from here directly to Wilmington, or do you believe he stopped in Elkton on the way? Or is that just a location you searched?
That's a location that is associated with the suspect. So I don't personally think he stopped there. I think we were at that house too quickly. So I don't think he went there.
So you believe he went from here straight to the Wilmington area?
The timeline's pretty quick. I think he went up. Part of the investigation will be to recover any video related to today's events.
Is that how you identified him so quick?
No, I believe we were provided a name to start off the entire.
That's correct.
Yeah,
we were provided a name.
Correct. Just to even start our investigation.
Do you have ages or gender on the folks that have been?
We're not going to release. We believe everybody's an adult. Beyond that, we're not going to release any information until we fully identify after they've been identified and the families have been notified.
Can you give us a sense of what's happening up and down the I-95?
I'm sorry. There were more than 5. I don't know what the total count was. We've taken everybody to the Southern Precinct in order to interview, but there were quite a few more than the 5.
Can you give us a sense of what's happening right now up and down the I-95 corridor? How far north, how far south? What are you doing at various exits?
There is in the northeast corridor, there is a search for this vehicle and this suspect. Every police department, every police officer is aware of who is being looked for these crimes here and for the crime up in Delaware. So beyond that and the investigative tactics that are used, I'll just say that no stone will be left unturned until he's brought to custody. Right. Okay. But I'm just reminded, we have set up, working with the FBI, who's also on the scene with us, a tip line. So if anybody, again, you should not take it upon yourself to encounter this subject to confront him, but call 1-800-CALL-FBI, 1-800-CALL-FBI, and that tip line transfers into our investigators.
Sure, but is there anything you can say about allegations that this isn't his first incident?
No, there's nothing else I can say. I'm not familiar with his entire past at this point.
How confident are you that you're zeroing in on him?
Obviously, I would feel a lot better if we had taken him into custody at this point. But I'm confident. It's reassuring that we know, as much as you can be reassured in an incident like this, we know who we are looking for. But a suspect on the run can be quite elusive, and he's so far proving to be just that.
Still just a handgun, you believe it?
We still believe it to be just one handgun in this incident. I don't know what, again, for the Wilmington, I don't know any of the investigative information.
Sheriff, what would be your message to him?
Police officers found when they got here on to see what they saw exactly?
Unfortunately, as you see in any active shooter scene, you see people in need of medical assistance, and you have to approach that scene with a great deal of caution because we didn't know at the initial units responding whether the shooter was still on scene. So our deputies have dealt with this in the past with losing 2 of our own last year, and we dealt with it again today. And I'd like to say we'll never deal with it again, but in the real world that we all live with, unfortunately, these types of events are all too frequent.
Saying if your suspect is out there listening, what would you say to him?
I would ask him, obviously, to stop what he has started here today. Enough loss of life, and to stop and just turn himself in to the authorities. We can end this peacefully and preserve his life and any more lives that might be in jeopardy. So I would ask him to consider what he's already done and put an end to it and turn himself in. Yeah, again, I think that's part left to the investigators. Something I'm not comfortable talking about how the whole event unfolded inside at this point of the investigation. Okay, couple more, and then.
Have you been able to observe this vehicle like Easy Pass, toll booths, Jersey Turnpike, any of those tools in the last couple of hours?
Those things are obviously tools that are being looked at, but not to my knowledge. And one more, I heard.
Where in the building did the shooting all happen? Was this all in one room, contained in one spot? People, did he go room by room?
Again, I'm going to leave that open. Let the investigation pan out some more before I answer. I think it took place throughout the business, but it's not a 100% concrete answer. No idea. We do not believe that in this incident here that he had any assistance whatsoever. We believe at this point of the investigation that what happened here today, he acted alone. So I'm gonna wrap it up there. And Christy, we have any idea on? As soon as we have some names, we'll get them out to you as soon as we possibly can. But family notifications have to come first. Yes. I don't think anybody anticipated an issue here today when he came to work, if that answers the question. From what I've heard so far, I don't think anybody thought something like this could unfold here today. Not that I'm familiar with. The investigation has shot.
All right, so that was officials there in Maryland describing the workplace shooting that happened earlier this morning. 3 dead, 2 critical. And the worst part is this suspect is still on the loose. So a manhunt going on in the Maryland-Delaware area right now. Our thoughts are with everyone in that area as well as law enforcement officials as they continue to search out for that suspect, what they call a very heinous crime. All right, here is what we have coming up next here on News Now. We are awaiting a White House press briefing. Take a look at this shot as reporters are ready for Sarah Huckabee Sanders. Also going on right now, still on Capitol Hill, Attorney General Jeff Sessions speaking to the Senate Judiciary Committee. All that coming up next here on News Now. Welcome back here to News Now. Taking a live look at the White House briefing room. We are awaiting Sarah Huckabee Sanders to take the podium. Hi, everybody. Mike Page here as we continue on with News Now. And it has been just a busy day right here on News Now. A lot of breaking news aspects as well as we continue to monitor Attorney General Jeff Sessions' testimony at Capitol Hill. Let's listen to a little bit more of that. This is all happening live, and we'll continue to wait right here for the White House press briefing to begin.
Targets, and just like a wiretap that a police officer may or a law enforcement officer may get access to, there may be more than the person whose phone is tapped in a domestic criminal investigation who actually comes on the line. But the fact that somebody else that isn't necessarily the target of the investigation comes on the telephone and you happen to hear their conversation too doesn't mean that that represents an illegal or an unconstitutional search under the Fourth Amendment. As you know, there's multiple levels of supervision, both at the intelligence community, like the National Security Agency, elaborate protocols to protect the privacy of U.S. persons who may be incidentally collected as part of this process. There are audits. There is congressional oversight. Both of the House and the Senate have intelligence committees who take this matter very seriously on a bipartisan basis. And Senator Feinstein and I both represent the Judiciary Committee on the Intelligence Committee for that purpose, because we take that and all of the committees or the work done in this area very seriously. But I think most people don't realize that there's also federal court supervision, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court, that monitors the activities of the intelligence community in a way to make sure that the privacy rights of Americans are protected and the Constitution is enforced. So the chairman's given me a little latitude here since this is my first round, but would you mind just sort of summarizing your support for the Section 702, and if you disagree with any of the characterization I've made, please feel free to say so.
Thank you for your support, and actually I appreciate how you've been able to find time to master the details of this. It's a complex subject. I thank you for doing it. Look,
since you answered the same question for me, can you give a short answer to him?
There's no doubt you have a right to surveil the communications of a person who's a non-citizen who's abroad. And the reason you do that is to find out who they're talking to. If they're talking to a terrorist, and you really want to know if they're talking to a terrorist in the United States. We don't have the money or the time or the effort just to surveil the world, so we have some basis to assume this person might be connected to terrorism before we would even undertake to do so. But the obvious purpose of it is to find out who they're talking to and what they might be plotting. It's not necessary to have a warrant. The courts have never required that. To do so would be unimaginable problem for our officers, and we can maybe there's some things we can do to create confidence, but I hope that as you wrestle through with it that we don't add things that aren't really valuable but make it problematic for our agents to be effective in using this constitutionally approved procedure.
Would it be dangerous to erect obstacles to the use of Section 702 or to allow it to lapse? Would it be dangerous to the American people?
There's no doubt about it. As the Director of National Intelligence, the head of the National Security Agency, the head of the FBI have all testified.
I'm going to take my 5 minutes now. During your June 13th hearing before the Senate Select Committee on Intelligence, you testified that you had discussed the issue of James Comey's firing with Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein before either of you were confirmed for your current position. Mr. Comey was fired May 9th. Why did you talk to Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein about the firing of Mr. Comey? And what did you discuss with him? And when did you come to the conclusion that James Comey needed to be terminated?
My view, after discussing with Director Comey, my possible new Deputy Attorney General, Rod Rosenstein. We discussed it as two professionals. He was United States Attorney 12 years. I was United States Attorney 12 years. We love the department. We know about it. And it was my best judgment, as I think I expressed it, that a fresh start at the FBI was probably appropriate.
Why did you think that Mr. Comey needed to be removed from his position?
Well, I didn't think it was essential at that time, but that was my best judgment, and I think his, as he's indicated. But I believe a few weeks before he was actually terminated, he was testifying before Congress, and at that time asserted he believed he was correct to take over the Clinton investigation and to announce its conclusion and that it was being closed. And he further testified that he would do it again. Now, that was a fairly stunning event for both of us, and it did highlight the problem more significantly than it had been before.
In regard to opioids, we passed the Comprehensive Addiction and Recovery Act. You and I have quoted a lot of statistics about the extreme number of deaths. With tools like CARA, what is the Department of Justice doing to prevent overdose death and combat drug trafficking and addiction in our communities, and what further steps do you feel need to be taken by the Department of Justice or Congress if you feel that there needs to be additional steps taken?
Mr. Chairman, this is a top priority of ours in the Department of Justice. We've never seen anything like 52,000 deaths in 2015. That was unprecedented, nothing close. Now, last year it was 64,000 deaths. So we have sent 12 new prosecutors into the field directed solely to this problem in the key areas where we have the biggest problems. They'll be focusing on pharmacies, doctors, distributors, and drug dealers of various kinds. If we can keep people from being addicted by prescription drugs, we'll have fewer people becoming addicted to heroin and dying from fentanyl. We had big success recently in prosecuting a number of physicians and professionals for drug problems or distributing improperly prescription drugs. We've announced a new data analytics system. And this is a computer-based system that you can identify what outlets, doctors, hospitals, or pharmacies who have a disproportionate.
All right, folks, we are going to step away from Attorney General Jeff Sessions, take you out to the White House. Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the podium.
This imminent victory by the global coalition and our brave service members comes at a high cost, particularly to the Syrian Democratic Forces, who suffered many casualties as they fought to liberate their own country from the oppression of ISIS. Instead of caring for the urgent humanitarian needs of Raqqa's residents, ISIS utilized the money it stockpiled to finance terrorist attacks across the world, including against many Muslims. As coalition and our partner forces closed in around them, ISIS used civilians as human shields and killed those who attempted to flee. ISIS barbaric acts have left many scars across the region, and we remain committed to supporting stabilization efforts and local security forces in liberated areas through a political transition in Syria. Unfortunately, the Syrian regime and its supporters hindered the efforts to liberate Raqqa. Instead of focusing on fighting ISIS, the pro-regime forces attacked our partners and attempted to block them from liberating the Syrian people from the brutality of ISIS. While we know ISIS and its destructive ideology will remain a threat, the liberation of Raqqa will mark the beginning of a new phase in the Syrian conflict. As we and our partners take away the ability of ISIS to plot and carry out attacks from territory they control, we will continue to seek the de-escalation of violence in other battlefields across Syria. Looking ahead to tomorrow, we will be welcoming Governor Rosello of Puerto Rico to the White House to talk about the ongoing recovery and rebuilding efforts. We will continue working hand in hand with local leaders in all areas of our country that have been impacted by several natural disasters in recent months. And as President Trump has repeatedly said, we stand with our fellow citizens. We're here to help and get them back on their feet. And with that, I will take your questions. Quiet. John.
Sarah, the president said earlier today that he would not allow insurance companies to pad their pockets with money from the federal government. The White House has some concerns about the Alexander Murray bill. Can you articulate what those concerns are?
Look, we've said all along that we want something that doesn't just bail out the insurance companies, but actually provides relief for all Americans. And this bill doesn't address that fact. So we want to make sure that that's taken care of. We think that this is a good step in the right direction. This president certainly supports Republicans and Democrats coming to work together, but it's not a full approach, and we need something to go a little bit further to get on board.
Can you articulate specifically what the White House is concerned about?
Some of the things that the president,
about outreach dollars and making sure that the money doesn't go to insurance.
Some of the things that the president has stated before, he wants to lower premiums, he wants to provide greater flexibility, he wants to drive competition, he likes the idea of block grants to states. Those are a lot of the ideas that he'd like to see in a health care plan.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. Let's go to the president's tweet this morning, if we can. What proof does President Trump have when he says Congresswoman Wilson is not telling the truth? Are there recordings of his phone call with Maisha Johnson?
No, but there were several people in the room from the administration that were on the call, including the Chief of Staff, General John Kelly.
The president also said that he has called every family of someone who's died. Is that true?
The president's made contact with all of the families that have been presented to him through the White House Military Office.
There have been families that have since come forward to the Associated Press. Their names are in these reports who say they've not actually heard from this White House in any capacity.
All of the individuals that the president has been presented with through the proper protocol have been contacted through that process. Jeff.
Sarah, just to follow up on the health care question, is it correct then to say that President Trump does not support this deal in its current form?
Correct.
And
I think he stated that pretty clearly today.
And then just as a follow-up on another issue, he had a conversation today with Governor Reynolds of Iowa. Can you tell us a little bit about what they discussed, and did he make any assurances about the renewable fuel standard during that discussion?
They didn't make any assurances on that specific issue. It was discussed, and they're going to continue to look at that process, but no definitive decision was made on RFS on today's call, but it was discussed. Justin.
Today, Secretary Mnuchin was talking about the tax framework, and he said it was, quote, very hard not to give tax cuts to the wealthy as part of a framework that cuts rates across the board. It seems like an acknowledgement of the realities of math and sort of the independent analysis of the president's tax plan, but as recently as a month ago, the president said that this plan would not benefit the wealthy.
That's not the focus of the tax plan. The focus, as we've said time and time again, the focus and the priority of the framework that the White House has laid out is to benefit the middle class, and that's
you would agree with Secretary Mnuchin then
that there may be some people that receive tax cuts that are also in the wealthy bracket, yes, but the fact is the priority again remains that middle class Americans are the ones that are most impacted, and that's where the priority and the focus lies.
Sarah, what is the criteria that the White House Military Office uses for presenting names of families to the president after there have been casualties in combat?
So there's a process that is a standard protocol. Once a person is killed in action, the first steps, the process begins with a DOD casualty assistance officer making next of kin notifications. After that, they create a package that's sent to the White House Military Office That package is then reconfirmed. All of the details and the contents of the package have to be confirmed by the White House Military Office. Once that process is completed, the president or other members of the administration can engage in contact.
Just to follow up on that, so are you saying that if the president hasn't contacted the family members of every service member who's been a casualty since he came to office, it's because of the protocols of that office?
That's my understanding. If there's a specific case, I'd have to look into it, but as a whole and generally speaking, that's my understanding.
And just to follow up on this week, why did the president wait 12 days to speak publicly about the...
As I just said, I walked you through that process. So the DOD package that was sent to the White House arrived on Thursday of last week. The White House Military Office confirmed the contents of that package on Monday, and the letters had been drafted over the weekend. They were sent once that confirmation was completed, and calls were scheduled on Monday to be made on Tuesday.
But I wasn't just asking about the family, asking about why he didn't make public remarks.
About contact. Is the president satisfied he has learned everything he wants to know about the situation itself in Niger? Pentagon sources have described it as what was interpreted to be initially as a low-risk mission. The ambush was a big surprise. There was no air cover, 30 minutes for French air cover to arrive. Questions about the speed of the evacuation.
All right, everybody. News Now will be continuing. Join us at youtube.com/Fox10 Phoenix. You can continue to watch Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the podium, a White House press briefing just getting started. So that's going to do us for Fox 10 Extra. Thanks so much for joining us. I'm Mike Page. Have a great Wednesday.
Families he's contacted.
Right, I can't get into the specifics of the details of the raid at this point, but again, I don't think you can ever use the word satisfied with the process when there's a loss of life for someone in the military.
Deborah,
I'll come back. You got time, Deborah.
I have a Las Vegas question. Is the administration looking at having the ATF ban bump stocks, or does the president think that Congress should do it?
We're certainly still looking into and having a review done of that process, and when there's an official policy position, I'll make that announcement.
How long do you think that will
John?
Yeah. Thank you, Sarah. Two questions. When the Alexander Murray bill came up at the scrum in the Rose Garden Monday, there were questions about whether it would contain federal funding for abortions, and these concerns have been raised by several pro-life lawmakers on Capitol Hill. Will the president rule out signing any kind of measure that includes funding for abortion?
The president stated that he would like to see a health care bill that does not include funding for abortion.
Will he rule out signing one that does?
I believe that that is probably something that would be a priority for him, but in terms of negotiating what that health care package would look like, I'm not going to do that from the podium today. Hold on, I'm going to try to take one question a day to get to everybody. John Decker.
Thank you, Sarah. A question about the NFL. Roger Goodell, the commissioner of the NFL, earlier today said that all players should stand during the playing of the national anthem. Earlier this week, there was no change in policy as it relates to the NFL mandating that all players in the NFL stand for the national anthem. Does the president believe that he's winning this argument or has won this argument as it relates to what he said about whether players should stand for the playing of the national anthem?
I think it's certainly a step in the right direction. As we've said many times before, the president supports standing for the national anthem, saluting the flag, and honoring those men and women in uniform that fight to protect it.
Sarah, thanks. Does the president feel, as a matter of principle, that it is not adequate to simply send a letter of condolence to the family of a slain service person, as President Bush and President Obama typically did? And does he feel that it was not adequate for President Obama to have sent a letter to General Kelly but not called General Kelly on the death of his son?
I don't think that there's anything that any president can do. There's never going to be enough that a president president can do for the families of those that are killed in action. The point the president was making is that there's a different process. Sometimes they call, sometimes they write letters, sometimes they engage directly. The comments were certainly, I think, taken very far out of context by the media, and if there's any frustration, I think that's where it should be focused.
Sarah. Let me ask you about something Steve Mnuchin had said, since you guys talk about the stock market a lot and the president does as well. He said, and I quote here, "There's no question in my mind that if we don't get it done," meaning tax reform, that you're going to see a reversal of significant amount of these gains, essentially saying if tax reform doesn't happen, there could be a major correction on the corner of Wall and Broad. How concerned is the president at this point of that possibility?
We're confident that we're going to get tax cuts done, and so that's what we're focused on, and we're going to continue pushing forward until we get there.
And on the healthcare bill, if you don't mind, what changed?
I'm sorry, I'm just going to take one question a day.
The president tweeted about the California wildfire situation. Does he have any plans at this point to visit California and to survey the damage in person? And if he doesn't, does that speak to a lack of interest in helping the state recover from the wildfires?
Not at all. Again, the administration has been very engaged throughout this process. We're going to continue to be there. We're continuing to talk with state and local officials on the ground and work with those individuals to make sure that whatever aid is needed, that we can help provide that process.
Is he going to go to the state, though?
There's not a trip planned at this time, but it certainly hasn't been ruled out either. Philip.
Thank you, Sarah. Can you please clarify the president's position on Kurdistan, especially on Iraqi Kurdistan, especially given the takeover of Kirkuk? And does the president see Kurdistan as an ally in general?
As we've said before, that position hasn't changed. I know I've talked about it a couple times. We urge all sides to avoid escalating this further. We oppose the violence from any party, and we'd like for them to be focused on helping continue in the fights against ISIS, and Iran, and that's where we'd like to see their energy focus on that front.
They're keeping the status quo.
Sorry, I'm going to keep to one question.
Thanks, Sarah. It's been more than 2 months since the president said that he would declare the opioid epidemic a national public emergency. On Monday, he said he'd get it done next week, but that to get to that step, a lot of work had to be done and called it time-consuming work. Can you explain why it's taking so long, detail some of what this time-consuming work is, and what players are involved in this process?
There's a very in-depth legal process that goes with declaring a national emergency. We'll make further announcements on that next week, but there have been multiple people. It's an interagency process. A lot of different stakeholders have been involved, and we'll have further announcements on that next week, like the president said.
Can you tell me whether or not, is there a...
Sorry, I'm going to stick to the one question. Yeah.
Just following on the tax reform meeting today, can you just sort of talk about the strategy from the White House going forward on this? I know that Mark Short had told us before that Democrats were a must-have on this bill or on tax reform. Is that still where things are?
I think it's pretty simple. The strategy is to get enough votes to pass tax cuts.
Okay, so can you just elaborate a little bit on the getting Democrats on board?
Look, we'd love to see them get on board. We don't know why any Democrat would want to be against providing tax relief and tax cuts specifically to middle-class America. I don't know why anybody wouldn't want to get on board with that. Hunter?
Thank you, Sarah. It's been almost a month since Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico. Almost 80% of the island is without power, and about 1 million Americans, a third of the population there, still don't have reliable drinking water. Does the administration consider the current state of affairs in Puerto Rico acceptable? And when it comes to Puerto Rico, does the buck stop with President Trump?
Look, we're continuing to do everything that we can to help the people of Puerto Rico. It's one of the reasons that the governor will be here at the White House tomorrow to continue those conversations, to talk about how best the federal government can help aid state and local governments and help in the rebuilding and recovery efforts. Eamon?
Thank you, Sarah. On the Fed chair search, the president once said that he considers himself to be a low interest rate guy. Does he still consider himself to be a low interest rate guy, and will that have any bearing on who he selects to run the Fed?
As the president said yesterday, he's interviewed a number of very qualified individuals, and he'll make that announcement in the coming days, and we can deliberate all of the details of that once that happens. I'm sorry.
Days, not weeks?
Days that do add up to weeks, so let's see.
Are you signaling anything there, Sarah? That's all I'm trying to get at.
On the phone call real quick, what exactly is the president denying? Is he denying that he ever spoke these words to the widow that that he must have known what he signed up for, or is he just saying that she took it the wrong way and it was taken out of context?
The president's call, as accounted by multiple people in the room, believed that the president was completely respectful, very sympathetic, and expressed the condolences of himself and the rest of the country, and thanked the family for their service, commended them for having an American hero in their family, and I don't know how you could take that any other way.
That he didn't say those words. It was the context. He felt that she put it in the wrong context. Is that it?
I'm not going to get into the back and forth. I think that the sentiment of the president was very clear. He took the time to make a call to express his condolences, to thank the family for this individual's service, and I think it frankly is a disgrace of the media to try to portray an act of kindness like that and that gesture and to try to make it into something that it isn't. Peter.
Sarah, did the president speak to his chief of staff, General John Kelly, before invoking his son's death and what has become a political argument?
I know he's spoken to General Kelly multiple times yesterday and today.
On this very topic, in other words, did General Kelly know he would be raising the issue of his son's memory when talking about
I'm not sure if he knew of that specific comment, but they had certainly spoken about it, and he's aware, and they've spoken several times since then.
Can you describe how General Kelly feels about it? Is he comfortable with the way his son's memory?
I think that General Kelly is disgusted by the way that this has been politicized, and that the focus has become on the process and not the fact that American lives were lost. I think he's disgusted and frustrated by that. And if he has any anger, it's towards that. Fred.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. The House a few weeks back passed the ban on pain-capable abortions. Where does the president or the ONG has said that the president would sign this legislation? Is the White House putting pressure on the Senate to pass the Lindsey Graham bill that would ban the 20-week?
I'm sorry, what was the last part of the question?
Is the White House putting pressure on the Senate to pass the Lindsey Graham 20-week ban?
I know that there have been conversations about that, and the administration supports that policy, but beyond that, I don't know if there have been further conversations or pressure applied, but certainly support that effort.
Sarah.
April.
Sarah, Congresswoman Wilson, I talked to her a couple of hours ago, and she says that this is the president's Benghazi. She says that that Jackson was, that the Green Berets were in Niger trying to find out information and doing a mission about Boko Haram. And she said that his transmitter was still emitting for 2 days, emitting a signal when he was located. And she says that makes no sense why he wasn't located. What say you about that? And also, what do you say about her comment that he did not know, and the wife, the widow, said that the president did not know his name. He kept saying, "Your God, your God."
Just because the president said your guy, I don't think that means that he doesn't know his name. As the president stated, the hardest job he has is making calls like that. I think it is appalling what the Congresswoman has done and the way that she's politicized this issue and the way that she is trying to make this about something that it isn't. This was a president who loves our country very much, who has the greatest level of respect for men and women in the uniform, and wanted to call and offer condolences to the family. And I think to try to create something from that the Congresswoman is doing is frankly appalling and disgusting.
What did you say about what she said about Boko Haram and Niger? What did you say about what she said about the mission and been comparing?
As I said to Major before, I'm not going to get into the details of that action at this point.
Was she right?
As I said before, I'm not going to get into the details of that action at this time. And when we have further information, I'll be happy to discuss it with you.
Thank you. I just want to, setting aside the Congresswoman, setting aside the discussion about the politicization of this, the woman who raised Sergeant Johnson spoke to the Washington Post and said she felt like her son had been disrespected. And again, I'm not asking you about what Congresswoman Wilson had to say. I'm not asking about any of that. But given that somebody who has, as you rightly note, making these phone calls is probably one of the hardest things a commander-in-chief has to do. Given that,
Is the president at all reconsidering the way that he communicates with these families? Has General Kelly counseled him on perhaps how he might want to choose or change his words in the future?
General Kelly was present for the call and thought it was completely appropriate. He thought the call was respectful, and he thought that the president did the best job he could under those circumstances to offer condolences on behalf of the country. Philip.
On NAFTA, the Canadian and the Mexican negotiators have rejected the U.S. proposals that were described as unconventional and troubling. Is NAFTA dead?
Not yet, but as the president said, it's a bad deal, and he wants to make sure that we have a deal that benefits American workers. That's what this administration is focused on. We're going to continue to push forward, and if we can't get there, then we'll let you know what the changes are. Francesca.
Thank you, Sarah. In a tweet this morning, President Trump said that former FBI Director James Comey lied, leaked, and totally protected Hillary Clinton. He also asked, where is the Justice Department on this? What exactly does the president want the Justice Department to do? Is he calling for a prosecution of James Comey? What's he asking for here?
Look, the White House hasn't and won't offer a legal opinion on Comey's conduct, but in fact, to the contrary, the White House has actually deferred, as it should, any and all legal questions regarding Director Comey to the Department of Justice. That's the appropriate venue for those things to be dealt with.
What's the Department of Justice to do, though, in his tweet this morning? That's what I'm asking.
We refer any legal action to the Department of Justice. Anything on that front would be handled by them. Sarah.
Sarah, normally when the president is upset about something, we hear from him pretty quickly about it, whether it's an issue with the senator, whether it's an issue with the NFL. So why did it take nearly 2 weeks for him to say something about this ISIS ambush? Not to reach out for the families necessarily, but even to offer public condolences or to explain to the American public what happened and how the deadliest combat mission involving American troops went so wrong.
As I said before, there is a protocol for that, but there's also, we did make public remarks from the administration. I know I did in short order after that happened from the podium at the direction of the president, and I speak on his behalf, and I did that on behalf of the president and the administration.
Sarah, you brought up politicizing a couple of times in relation to Congresswoman Wilson, but did the president politicize General Kelly's son's death by bringing it up as a defense for his claims about what past presidents did or did not do with
He was responding to a question and stating a fact.
Just to clarify your earlier answer, you're not denying that in some point in the conversations the president used the words, "It's what he signed up for."
I spoke specifically to the sentiment that was offered by the president, and I didn't get into the details of a personal call because I don't find that to be that appropriate. Trey?
Thank you, Sarah. You opened up at the top discussing the liberation of Raqqa. So my question for you is, how does the president envision future U.S. involvement in both Syria and Iraq post-ISIS?
We want to continue to work with our coalition forces to completely destroy and defeat ISIS. Right now, that's the priority, and that's the focus, and that's what we're going to continue to be focused on at this time. Thank you guys so much for today, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, folks, so that was Sarah Huckabee Sanders with her White House press briefing. Samia will be up next. Coming up at 4 o'clock Eastern, everyone. 4 o'clock Eastern, Samia will be up here. We're going to take a short break. You're watching News Now.
Yep, I hear everybody.
I do hear you.